You're listening to the Last 10th podcast. It's where the rubber meets the road. The Last 10th podcast is a show about running and life, or life as a runner. Join me in conversation with coaches, runners, and athletes from diverse backgrounds. Together, we explore how the practice of running helps to navigate through the many challenges we face on the road of life. The last 10th of a mile is often the longest and hardest part of our journey from the start to the finish. Run your last 10th with me, your host, Coach Pilar. Hey y'all, it's me, your host, Coach Pilar Arthur Sneed. Thanks so much for joining me here for another episode of the Last 10th podcast. If you have not had an opportunity to do so, please head on over to Apple Podcasts and rate and comment on this show. Doing that will help other listeners just like you to find and enjoy the show. Then I am super duper excited to welcome Dr. Dani Espino to the show today. I wanted to talk to Dr. Dani because of two things. The first is that she is a competitive runner, having qualified for Boston, Chicago, and New York. That's huge. And then the second thing is that she also is a practicing doctor of physical therapy. Merging the two of those things makes her uniquely suited to chat with us about how to build better running practices and how to also recover better from injury. I hope you'll enjoy today's episode as much as I enjoyed chatting with Dr. Dani. How about if we get started? Hey, y'all, it's me, your host, Coach Pilar Arthur Sneed. Thanks so much for joining me here for another episode of the Last 10th podcast. As you know, every single week, I get super excited with all of the guests that I get to bring to the show. And this week is no different. I am super excited to welcome Dr. Daniela Espino to the show. Dr. Dani is a physical therapist. She graduated from, let me make sure I have the university correct, Florida International University in Miami. She also competed herself in NCAA Division I track. She has qualified for not one marathon, not two marathons, but 3 marathons. And I'm talking about New York City, Chicago, and also Boston. So we're talking about the big 3 of the 6 that we are all trying to get that golden chalice of the 6-star medals. So Dr. Dani, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I'm so glad that you could take time out to visit with me today. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super stoked to be here with you this morning, my time in Seattle. I know it's afternoon over in the ATL.
You got it. Yeah, I'm in upstate New York. Yeah.
I'm like, where are you? You're in ATL or New York?
I'm in New York.
Because of India, New York.
Yeah.
New York. Okay, that's right.
Yeah, you got it.
My bad.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. We're everywhere.
How's the weather up there for you right now?
Right today, it's a little bit snowy. There's snow on the ground. Looking out my window, there is snow on the ground, but the snow has melted by now. So it's chilly. Yeah,
we've had snow the past 2 weeks here now. Definitely not built for snow. I'll tell you that much.
Where are you from originally?
So I was actually born in Peru.
Okay.
But I grew up in Miami since I was 4. And then the past 7 years, I was in Atlanta, Georgia. And then I recently relocated to Seattle, Washington. So
how exciting.
Quite a change across the country.
Absolutely. Across the country, across time zones, and across weather zones as well, because Atlanta is hot.
Hotlanta, this is right.
And Seattle is not.
gloomy.
hot.
It is gloomy. Yes.
So before we get too far into our conversation, where I usually really like to start is I keep my introductions pretty brief, but where I like to start is I really love to hear from guests. Tell me a little bit about you. Tell me, how you got started in running and maybe anything that you'd like to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So it honestly came down to my PE coach in 6th grade. They needed runners for the varsity team, and I tried it out. Ended up I was pretty decent at it.
Yes.
And then I quit for a year, and then we had a female coach that came in, and we all have that one female role model that we look up to, and she absolutely came to me one day. She's like, "Listen, you're not a dancer. I danced for about 15 years
Wow.
competitively," and she's like, "You need
Wow.
to quit and dedicate yourself to running."
Wow.
And so I gave up running, which my parents were very grateful because a lot more inexpensive of a sport.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I picked up running. And then at that point, I kind of made it my mission. I wanted to help out my family in order to go to college. So my goal was get a scholarship, to get an education. But I knew running had become my passion at that point. And
Wow.
that's how I started running. And now 20 plus years later, I'm still running.
Wow. Okay. So, but you danced for
Yeah.
15 years.
Yeah. So I started dancing when I was young. My mom always jokes that I was a big tomboy, as you would call it back in the day.
Okay.
Of course, now
Okay.
the term isn't very, it's changed. But so she wanted to put me in dance, and dance truly is a sport. So I did jazz, ballet, hip hop.
Wow.
But running, it was something special about running that
Yeah.
just completely captivated me. So
Yeah. So when did you start in running? Was that in sixth grade?
yeah, so I started 6th grade. I didn't run 7th grade, and then I started back up 8th grade, and then that's it. Kind of kicked it off from there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what about running did you find to be so magical, particularly as a young person? What was it about running that was for you where you were like, in comparison, right, to dancing? Because dancing really is this whole body experience as well. What was it about running?
Yeah, and it's, I feel like that's changed, as we mature and I grew up. That sort of my relationship with running has definitely changed. But when I first started, I would say I was kind of captured by the fact that it was the amount of work that you put into it, you see the results. So I knew if I had this goal, as long as I put in the work daily, I should reap the benefits of it. And that's exactly what, I was able to do.
Wow. So you have competed competitively. I don't know, like it's a total redundant, totally redundant to say that, but you have, ran competitively. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that experience as a young person and then going into college, because you mentioned, getting a scholarship or wanting to get scholarships to get into school. So tell me a little bit about that experience.
Yeah. I definitely always tell every young person I meet that's a runner, like that's kind of my first question. Do you want to run in college? If you do, I absolutely recommend it. It was definitely one of the best experiences in my life. Like I said, I ran for FIU, Florida International, down in Miami, Florida. It just opened up the opportunities to travel to, all these different places, meet all these different people, compete. My coaches did a really good job at really exposing us to like big competition, like talking about Penn State, running at the Armory in New York, which I'm sure you've been there a couple times in the Armory.
Yes.
I absolutely like, wow. Racing there, there's like, I don't think there's any greater feeling. Running at Mount Sac relays.
Wow.
It was just incredible to be able to see, again, how much exposure you have, what's out there, and what a difference just in terms of growing up where I came from and then seeing everything else that was out there. So
tell me a little bit about your journey in Peru and then, coming to America.
Yeah, for sure. So like I said, I was born in Peru. I don't really remember much when I was little. My mom, we moved to Miami when I was 4. But
so you wouldn't.
I wouldn't know too much. Yeah. But going back though, it's crazy. Yeah. At one point when I was in high school, my parents actually considered moving back to Peru, and I was like,
wow.
I'm like, you're not taking me. Like, I don't know what life is like there, And then when I visited as an adult, I was just like, like what a difference my life would have been. Like, of
Mm.
course, still being predominantly more of a masculine country.
Mm.
The
Mm.
opportunities for females are still up and coming. It feels like
Mm.
we're way behind compared to the
Mm.
US.
Mm.
So, and I always ask myself, like, what a difference, like what would my life have
Mm.
been had
Mm.
my mom not made the hard decision to leave.
Mm.
So
Mm. Mm. And what do
forever
your
grateful for my mom.
right? Absolutely. And what does your mom and what do your parents do? What do they do?
Yeah, so they're both in real estate. My dad is more of like the real estate agent. He just switched over to commercial real
Mm.
estate,
Mm.
and my mom does more like the mortgage loans. So
Oh, okay.
they're a team.
Got it. Got
Yeah,
it. Got it. And
they're
so
both.
are they in business together?
Yeah, at one point we did in 2000, right before the recession of the real estate crash in
Mm.
2008.
Mm.
Unfortunately, their company, they had to shut it down.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
But my dad, being the person he was persistent, and yeah,
Mm.
they're both
Mm.
running their own businesses again. So
Wow, that's
pretty awesome.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you had no inclination in your thought process that real estate was something that you were like interested in?
No, now that I'm in Seattle, though, let me tell you, with the housing prices out here,
You're like, maybe.
I was like, maybe. Yeah, I was like, maybe. No, I actually, this is my stepdad that raised me, but I took his last name and everything. He's my father.
Mm.
My biological dad is actually an architect. So at one point I did consider being an architect,
Mm.
and then
Mm.
I just knew I was called for medicine.
Mm.
So.
Okay. So I want to go back to your journey in college sports. So like for me, becoming an athlete is something that happened to me very much later in life.
I saw that. I was reading through your
You know,
website.
so I'm fascinated on two fronts by folks who found running when they were young people and had an opportunity to kind of grow through this sport at a young age, right? Because you start in sixth grade, you're obviously going to see lots of changes in yourself, not only in your relationship to the sport, but also in how your body performs in the sport. I guess, at what point, because you are a physical therapist, like at what point in your journey did you go, okay, I love this running thing and I love medicine? Like when did the two
merge? Yeah. So I majored in bio, and actually as soon as I graduated, I was a teacher, a middle school math and science teacher. Always knowing I wanted to go back to medicine, and like every runner, I've experienced a fair share of injuries. And again, it came down to, I met this one female physical therapist, business owner, and I just loved the way she treated me, how she kind of interacted with me. And she was like, hey, you should try PT. So I started shadowing, doing observation hours, and I knew that it was a career that I could definitely combine my love for running and medicine into one as well. And so much more than that, right? Like the reason why I like, a lot of times my mom's like, why didn't you go to med school? And honestly, sometimes I'm like, I should have, had I graduated and kind of gone through the steps. But what I love about physical therapy is that whole holistic approach, right? Like if you break it down to it, it's really exercise, wellness, bringing in the mental, combining all that, which is kind of what I do in my own personal life. So it just really resonates with me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the benefit that you have as a physical therapist, and I think if doctors could find this as well, the benefit that you have is that you are also a runner. So you get the runner's mentality.
Oh yeah, it's a special one.
Because most people don't understand, like, I guess, this slightly addictive, obsessive relationship that you have to this running thing when you go to a doctor's office and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm injured, but
when can I run?
When can I get back to it? Like tomorrow? Do you think? Do you know what I'm saying? And same thing with physical therapists. They don't necessarily generally get that unless they have had that same relationship. Yeah. So how do you use your experience as a runner in your practice of physical therapy to help runners like cope with that?
Absolutely. And I think it's kind of the fact that the people that I work with, they do know my background, they do know I'm a runner. It's kind of an unspoken thing, like, you get it. Like, I know you get it. So I think just delivering the message of like, hey, this might be a temporary setback, but kind of preparing you to launch and come back even stronger. It's a lot easier to communicate that message because I know that they know that I truly, everybody's going through something else, but I can at least understand what they're going through at a deeper level than somebody that's not a runner and medical professional. So I think they get that my goal is I want to get you to that start line and finish line just as much as you do.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, I'm definitely your number one cheerleader right behind yourself.
Absolutely.
And I think that's definitely what's helped me, help transition runners back to running and even, help them kind of reshape their mindset around what an injury is, what it does, and how you can actually capitalize off of that. So
tell me more about that.
Yeah, so you kind of nailed it in like what we were talking about. First question I always get is, all right, so Dr. Dani, when can I actually run, right?
Yes.
So, with every person I work, a couple things I want to do is, one, really help them understand how we got to that point. I always tell runners, at some point, you're going to get hurt. We're in a sport of running. Our body's going to break down. At some point, you're going to get injured. I don't think I've ever met a single runner that hasn't been injured at some point. If you have, please tell me what they're doing.
That's right. Let me know who that person is and where, like, what gene pool they're a part of. Yeah.
And then, so, there's, if we get a little bit more medical, there's, a couple different injuries that you absolutely do need to stop from running from, but majority of them, we can kind of find that balance of keeping you active. Like, nowhere in the spectrum do you need to be resting completely. Again, like I said, if we're talking more of a bone stress injury, something bone, yes, different scenario. But we can still keep you walking, still keep the strength training is a big part of it. So I think finding that point where we're like, hey, what can we do to keep moving forward? And I, like, kind of little, even if it's day by day, little by little, seeing what more can you do, what more can you add to kind of get us to the goal. So that's kind of how I approach the running injuries when I'm working with people.
From a mindset perspective, depending on the runner, how do you help them to kind of overcome that mindset of like, I'm not, because I know that for me, like, I'm right now, I'm literally running every day. And
are you in a streak?
I am.
Ooh, what day are you at?
Oh God, what day am I at? I think it's 406 maybe. Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
500 is going to be a big one.
I know, and it's slow. Wow. Like, it's like taking a little. It took not very long to get to 400. Because like once you hit 365, you're like, oh my goodness, 400 is like, it's just right there. But 500, another 100 days. But anyway.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congrats.
Yeah. So for me, the idea that now that I'm at this stage of 400, the idea of not running a day would be like, I'm sorry. What?
Can you run half a mile? Does that count? That counts, right?
No, it doesn't. Not.
It has to be 1 mile.
It has to be 1 mile.
I figured it was. Yeah. Run, walk, or
you can totally run, walk. It doesn't matter how. It doesn't matter how fast or slow. But like this, there's there. I think just in general, with runners, there are some self-imposed mindsets, right? Like, so some people are like, oh, if I run on a treadmill, well, that's not running. If I'm not running XYZ fast, that's not running. If I walk, that's not running.
Yeah.
So mindset is a huge thing. How do you help folks overcome that?
It is. I think that the one example that comes to mind is of one of the runners I coach, kind of a couple setbacks, injuries, illness, life in general. And our training kept getting delayed. So we just pivoted. We're like, all right, change the goal. We just adjusted to what we were dealing with. And I always like to tell people, like, yes, of course, we're all running. We all love running, but we can't let running dictate our lives. Like, we got to adjust our running to fit our life. And I think like as an individual, that's taken a long time for me to realize that. And you know, one of the biggest blessings that came for me from the pandemic was no races, no nothing. How, like, what am I training for? Like, I always felt like I had to be training for something. And like you just said, if I wasn't running X amount of miles a week at a certain amount of pace, what's even the point? Right? Like I might as well just sit on the couch. And,
right. It's sort of like this all or nothing, you know, all or nothing attitude. Yes. Yeah.
And so I've learned to kind of like pivot away from that. And it's still a work in progress. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I haven't perfected it. Being competitive, like running competitively for a long time, it's really hard when I'm not up at shape or any of that stuff. But all that to say is like being flexible and adjusting your goals. Like, and I know it's hard. It's like, I can't promise you that I'm probably telling, you know, whoever I'm working with, and I might sound like, wah, 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 yeah. But, but I think, you know, little by little kind of feeding like that, hey, it's okay. We need to pivot, but you're still setting a new goal that you can work toward. Just making it attainable is the big thing.
Absolutely. I think 100% making sure that you set goals that are attainable and realistic and not sort of like in that moment, reaching far beyond what you're going to be able to be capable of. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So what is it that keeps you personally engaged every day, specifically talking about this whole pandemic? I know a lot of runners have had to sort of shift their mindset throughout this pandemic, but what keeps you personally engaged in the sport of running?
Yeah. For me, it's always, I always joke around. My mom says, you can't sit still. It's more the mental side for me. That's how that's the big piece of my mental health. That's my time to meditate, to pray, to connect. So recently, especially kind of had a couple major changes in my life. That's kind of what I resorted to. I did need to take a step back from running as well. And then, so I took up hiking, like walking more, just being out in nature. And then now I feel like it was the new year. I'm like, all right, time to get back up on the horse. So I just did a time trial 2 days ago. Did a mile time trial. Like, I need to see what shape I'm in. It hurt. It hurt. I was like, am I doing this? This hurts so good, but to keep running like 404 meters, like I almost definitely sick after.
I understand.
So now I'm at a stage in my life right now that I'm ready to train for something else. So I'm considering signing up. I wanted to do a marathon, but I know I'm not ready to commit that amount of time that it takes to prepare for that. So instead, I'm gonna sign up for a half marathon and see how that goes. So
you've raised a really great, point in terms of training for events, different levels of events, in terms of like the time commitment that it takes to actually train well, right?
Yeah.
Both mentally and physically, to train well for a particular event. So you've qualified though for, okay, let's like Chicago and New York City, and then the holy grail of running the Boston Marathon. Talk to me about that experience, like just like from soup to nuts, like from training and then, running the event and all of it.
Yeah. So my first marathon ever was the New York Marathon. And of course, first 2 miles, slight decline. I accidentally jumped into the wrong corral ahead of mine. So I'm here running 5:50 something the first 2 miles. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna die.
Wow.
I'm nearing the half marathon, about to PR for my half.
Yeah.
You can already guess what happened the second half.
Yeah.
Luckily, I was able to maintain a pace that I still got to qualify in time for Boston.
Wow. In New York.
Yeah, with New York.
Wow.
Yeah. I forget what bridge it is that's super isolated. There's like absolutely nobody on
I
there.
don't know. I don't know New York City well enough to remember that, but I know what you're talking about. Yes.
All I remember was like one person in front of me, myself, and someone like way behind me. And I just saw like a no man's land. And I was like, I started crying. I was like, I just blew up. But luckily I had friends and family that were out there cheering for me, which, God, talk about a support network is so needed when you're training. And then so I qualified for Boston, for the Boston Marathon. I think this was 2018. And I qualified and I decided to join the team Miles for Miracles. So it's the Children's Hospital of Boston. So I was able to pair up with this kid. His name is James. Absolutely wonderful kid. Everything was going well, as you know, as one can hope for. And then I got a herniated disc.
Oh man.
Yeah. So I think 3 months before the Boston, I had a herniated disc. And at that time I was seeing my physical therapist and I was like, so can I run? Like
back to what we were talking about before. So like I've got this herniated disc and it hurts a lot. Like, but can
I run?
What do you think? Do you think it'd be a good idea for me to, run? What do you think? Literally. And what did she say?
So it was, at that time it was him. And I'm telling you, like I would drive and numbness and tingling down my entire leg into my toes. Like whenever I treat patients that with any sort of low back pain, I'm like I get it, like respect. This is not a joke. He basically was like, you need to, in a nice way, stop being dumb. like you know better. If you want any chance at all of making it back. So I started swimming, picked it up, everything in the weight room, biking. And then little by little, I was able to get back. But luckily at that point, I had accumulated enough fitness that doing the cross training, I was able to maintain. I wasn't necessarily able to, get any faster because of course I wasn't doing any specific marathon workouts, anything like that. But at that point, it didn't matter. Like I'm not missing out on my first Boston ever. And I'm teamed up with this amazing kid.
Yes.
So I was able to go out there for their training run, the last 20-mile training run.
Sure.
And then got to meet his family. And then the big day came. And of course, that was the year that it basically snowed out there torrential rain the entire time.
That's the year Des Linden won.
Yes, I got to meet Des Linden.
You got to meet Des Linden.
I went to one of her VIP events that she had, and talk about starstruck.
Yeah.
She was in front of me. I'm like, I couldn't talk. I was like, I feel like such a dork.
Understood.
I know. And so I must her some words. She was super nice, super sweet. And yeah, that's the year she won. I got to meet her, Shalane.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That whole, just like the whole experience, like soup to nuts is probably one that a lot of people, including myself, can relate to. Not the qualification part. Thanks for listening. The Last 10th podcast is a production of The Mindful Run Coaching and Training, and me, your host, Coach Pilar, with the help of great tools here on Anchor. If you like the show, remember you can listen on your desktop at anchor.fm. You can also listen on platforms like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, Spotify, and so many more. Now you can also view episodes on my new YouTube channel. Please feel free to leave me a message. I'd really love to hear your thoughts and feedback on the show, or even ideas for future guests. Don't forget to leave your thoughtful and positive review on Apple Podcasts. Apple makes it possible for so many people to find and listen to the show. Your reviews will help. Finally, if you really appreciate and love the stories and interviews that I've been sharing, please consider supporting the show. Click support on anchor.fm or in the Anchor app. A portion of the proceeds will always benefit my charity of choice. Have you heard about Anchor? It's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free, y'all. Free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and so many more. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. It's how I've made this podcast. So, have you got something you'd like to say? Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. But the joy and the excitement of finishing, your first marathon and then heading into your next marathon and then injury, and you're like, no, do you know how hard I have worked for this moment? You cannot tell me I cannot run.
Yeah. And then bring on the rain.
And then
crazy.
Yes. And then you show up and you're like, oh, well, this is definitely not the day that I was hoping for.
Yeah.
Not the day I was hoping for. Oh my gosh.
It wasn't. When I look back at the pictures, I like everybody's just like the grit you see on everybody's faces. That race was pure heart. Like whoever finished that race, it was pure, like, you've trained, you got here, you're getting across that finish line.
That's right. So wow. Congratulations.
One of my favorite marathons. Thank you.
Wow. That's awesome. And so awesome that you got to meet some running heroes.
Yeah.
As a side note, this past year in Chicago, they have that 5K beforehand. Yeah. So my husband and I have typically, we've gone and run that, and, we're running along, and I see, like, this blonde woman up ahead, and there's like little, these little girls like around her. And I'm like, I am pretty sure that's Shalane Flanagan. I'm pretty sure that's Shalane Flanagan. And as I'm, running around, and I see like those like little girls, and I'm like, oh my God, that's Shalane Flanagan. Oh my gosh, this is literally the only time in my life I will ever pass Shalane Flanagan running in a 5K. She was running with Girls on the Run, Chicago or whatever. And so she's running with the little girls, and it was just like, wow, this is amazing. And I didn't, I probably should have been like, oh my God, can I take your picture? I want to take your picture. But I was like, that would be like, you're interrupting these little girls, like, fantastic moment. And I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to be that person.
I might have been like scooted a selfie.
I think there was a guy behind me who did that. He was just like, click, but I was like, I don't want to be that person. Oh my God. That's amazing. So amazing. So let's talk a little bit about some things that are like maybe more educational, for runners that are listening, in terms of like maybe injury prevention. Like, what are some things that you feel runners can do to help themselves stay injury free?
Yeah. And it's there's so much out there, the strength training. Absolutely. If you ask anybody that I work with, I'm a big proponent of it. I also understand it's hard to get that in, trying to balance it out.
It's hard to get it in. And it's also strength training. Like, I know folks who are like really great at strength training are basically just like, I love it. I love strength training. I hate running. And I'm the opposite. I'm like, I love running. I hate strength training. Don't ever make me do it. I hate it.
What don't we like about it?
It's just like, that's such a great question.
I'm like, well, tell me more.
Yeah, tell me more about that. Yes, come to my couch. It's so it goes, I guess it probably goes back to like when my husband and I, like years ago, when we first got together, he comes from like the Joe Weider school of weightlifting, right? So we decided before we were going to get married, we're going to go to a gym and we're going to work out. And I just, at that time, it was like early 2000s or something. We're going to go to the gym, we're going to work out, and we're going to hoist weights. So we're in the gym like 2 hours every night, 2 hours. We're lifting weights, we're hoisting weights. Oh my gosh. And I just hated being inside. The other part of it is that, not unlike probably folks who dislike running, I guess like I never stuck with it long enough to really see results in a way in which I felt like they were results like that were for me, right? So I just never enjoyed it. I don't like up and down the lunges, and I gotta hoist the weight, and it's just so hard.
Yeah. It is.
It's just so hard.
And also 2 hours is a long time.
2 hours is a long time. I mean, now I try. I'm not very successful. Yeah. I'm not very successful to give myself like 10 minutes. You can do anything for 10 minutes. 10-minute workout, 1 minute of this, 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 do it. Go, you're done. But even then, I'm just.
I get it. I mean, in terms of that, like if you kind of take a training block, right, it really depends where in the cycle you are, in your training cycle, to incorporate that. But even just like you said, 15 minutes, I tell people, every time I program, I try to make sure that the session isn't going to last more than 30 minutes. And that's like pushing it. So, again, and I always say it's once is better than none. So even if it's once a week, it's better than none. But,
I know.
But yeah, I think what I found, for myself and working with people is one of the things that's been the most helpful is really assessing how you're feeling on a given day before you go on a certain run, and kind of asking yourself, how did I sleep? All the wellness questions. How do I sleep? How do I hydrate? How did I eat? How do I feel mentally today? Stress levels. Is it conducive to do a track workout today? Or do I need a 30-minute easy run out in the woods or something? So I think really asking yourself, especially before those track workouts, and this is something I tell the people I work with, if it's not the day, your body's already in that depleted state.
Yes.
You're just increasing your likelihood of getting injured.
Yes.
So adjust. Doesn't mean, now I also tell them, this doesn't mean every day you wake up and you're like, I don't feel like doing it today.
That's exactly right. You have to find a balance. What I think like we're similar in that sense. Like I usually, tell folks in terms of, I guess like that, I talk about this a lot, that motivation versus consistency thing is that motivation is something that it comes, it goes. Some days you're motivated, some days you're not. But consistency is the thing that's going to last forever. But if you are able to figure out the days when you don't feel like working out, or you don't feel like running, or whatever the case may be, and it's really a genuine, like, because of what you said, you're too tired, you're not hydrated, you didn't eat enough, whatever the thing might be. And the days when you're just like, I just don't feel like it. I just don't feel like it. And if you can overcome the days when you just don't feel like it, there's really no valid reason other than you just don't feel like it.
Exactly.
Then you can be more consistent, which is not to say that even that sometimes if you just don't feel like it, you just don't do it. But it can't be that every day you just don't feel like it and you don't do it.
Yeah. Because then you're definitely not going to see results.
Because then, results are never going to come. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, that pyramid structure. What's more important? Is it more important for you to sleep or to get in that extra session, right? So I really think it's, again, looking at that whole holistic approach, all the factors that are going to have a play into, your likelihood of staying healthy and not getting injured. For sure. Absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah.
I read something on your blog where you said something about stop stretching so much.
Depending what we're talking about.
Yes. I don't remember, like it was
probably tendons. It's probably tendons.
Yes. It was about like tendons and hamstrings, and myself personally, like my hamstring is just like, it hates me all the time. It hates me, particularly over the course of the last year. It's like, I just don't like you so much. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So kind of breaking it down, like when we're talking about runner injuries, what are the three main things that we're going to see as a clinician? Like I said, bones, kind of definitely a little bit more serious. Muscles, where we're talking about muscle strains, or tendons, right? And tendons tend to be, what I come across more often because of that overused nature. Everything in running is plyometric, like kind of jumps. Basically, running is jumping on one leg over and over again, right?
That's right.
So, and what's that role of the tendon? I tell people, just imagine the tendon is like a spring. So with every single step, every tendon is kind of doing boom, kind of like a spring, back and forth, that recoil and coil again. And a lot of times when I see people that are, whether it's Achilles tendinopathy, so an Achilles tendonitis issue, a hamstring tendinopathy, a glute med tendinopathy, those are kind of like your big three that you'll see in runners. They always describe that feeling of like, oh, my calves feel tight. Oh, my hamstrings feel tight. Oh, my performance feels tight. And the natural tendency of your body is like, if something feels tight, stretch it. But the way I like to explain tendons, and again, this is coming from clinicians that I've taken courses under, and just talking about people that they're able to break down this technical knowledge into a super simple example that you're like, oh, that makes sense. So let's talk about the hamstrings. I love talking about the hamstrings.
Yeah, sure.
So you kind of think of your sit bones, right? And you have that tendon that's on top of it. Anytime that you're stretching it, you're just putting more pressure on that tendon along that bone, which is constantly creating that friction and irritating it. And then I always tell people, think of everything else that you're doing in day-to-day life. Running is only 10% of our day. Sure. What are you doing with the other 90% of the day that's also causing you to further compress that tendon? You're sitting for like 10 hours at a time, sitting with your legs crossed, stretching it, which is why it's tricky to treat tendons, because you're constantly irritating them throughout the day. So that's kind of where that blog came from, of like, stop stretching your tendons, because it's actually being counterproductive when you're dealing with that specific pathology at that time.
Got it.
Foam, same thing. People will go to town foam rolling or using a lacrosse ball right on that hamstring, right at the bone. And it's doing the same thing. So yeah, if you feel that tightness sensation, foam roll around, do the lower hamstrings, but don't just go on that area that's irritated. And I like to explain it as that simple. All you're doing is constantly irritating it. You need to offload the area, let it come down.
Yes.
And the other thing is, a lot of that tightness feeling is stemming from the fact that muscle's overworked. So it's kind of giving you that signal like, hey, you got to increase my ability to do more work. Yeah. AKA make me stronger. So I can show up for you.
That's right.
So that's the other piece of and that's why I harp so much on the strength, because it really is. Running is not a simple task. It's not as simple as one foot in front of the other.
It's calling everything.
Everything. So if you want to, keep running for a long time, you're going to have to take care of everything that's breaking down. It's so repetitive that that's why I always tell people, cross train, bike, do something else on your off day that's going to give your body a different stimulus so that it adapts.
Yes.
Yeah. Such
good advice.
Thank you.
I really should follow it.
I get it. It's hard to.
The thing with streaking is that it is okay. Running is highly addictive, right? Highly addictive.
All the hormones that get released.
It's just you're just like you're like, all right, I'm in. I love this thing. I love it. I'm doing it. And then once you get over the stage in the streaking part where you're like, I run every day, it's a mile, I don't know if I can do it. Once you get over that, I think that there's an extra layer of addiction, because you're like, I don't want to break the streak. I want to break the streak, but you probably should. probably should. I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, it really depends, right? So like kind of taking it back to hamstrings is like again, most tendon stuff you can keep burning through, but you just need to make some changes. I'll give you a basic example of the hamstring. You probably shouldn't be running on hills. Because again, that's going to put your hip in more
Just
flexion. Keep compressing it. Going downhill is going to ask you to rely on your tendons more to kind of break and your muscles. So probably a nice flat treadmill run or or flat ground run. You could probably do that to keep your streak alive. And again, that's something that you kind of got to outweigh the costs. Is 1 mile, you probably could tolerate a mile if you're dealing with this and still meeting the goal. And again, it really depends where you are in that injury spectrum, highly advanced or a little bit more at the lower end.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I love tendons. That's my favorite thing to treat.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. That. Do most physical therapists have like an area where they're like, yes, if you give me a hip, oh yeah, I'm in there. I love that.
Oh yeah. Like anything, I know what what my strength areas are and what I can definitely use a little bit more knowledge, and I also know where it's out of my level of expertise and I need to refer somebody out. But yeah, like I personally had Achilles tendinopathy training for, I don't know if you've heard of the race in Atlanta.
I haven't had an opportunity to get down since the pandemic, but I've done the virtual like twice.
Yeah, definitely check it out. Tess does an amazing job at creating a super hilly course.
Yes. So I have heard.
Yes.
I've heard Atlanta is just hilly.
Yeah. Let me tell you, I thought Atlanta was hilly. Seattle is like mountains.
It's really even more hilly.
It's so bad. It is so bad.
You're like, how is it possible that a place could be even more hilly than where I came from? What is going on?
I'm telling you. And so like, given my history of like tendon issues, like I have to alternate. I have to go run at the track, or I have to find a flat area to run on. I can't physically run hills every single day. One, it's not necessary, but two, it's I know my injury history, and I know that's just kind of like feeding fuel to the fire.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about, okay, so now you have a runner that is injured. I mean, we talked a little bit about it, but now they're at the injury stage, and kind of moving them from injury back into the performance, phase.
Yeah, so definitely one thing I try to do, and the more I practice, the more I'm able to get better time frames, but really being clear cut from the beginning, like what a time frame you can expect to get back. It's one thing to get back to running, and it's another thing to get back to competing, right? Or performance. So it's kind of, that should be kind of the spectrum. You're going from injury. All right, cool. Can you tolerate walking now? What type of running can you tolerate? Can you tolerate just easy conversation runs several times a week without aggravating it? Cool, you can do that. Can you tolerate introducing one speed workout at a time? And I'm talking as simple as strides. So it's all kind of like introducing one thing at a time, so that we can identify if something derails us a little bit, we can quickly identify what we changed and how we can adjust from that. So it will kind of sticking with the tendon example, depending how long you've been dealing with it, like a tendon rehab cycle can be, 8+ weeks, 12+ weeks. And that depends what you're doing during that time frame. So
are you following my advice? This is really the question.
Right.
What I need to know is did you go home and run a hill? Did you or didn't you? You did. Aha.
Yeah. And like I said, the one of the reasons why I love treating tendons is I have people do what's known as a daily load test. So on a daily basis, at the same time, a simple test to see how irritated you are. And it breaks it down to pain levels. So again, 0 to 10. If you're kind of, let's say on Monday you woke up and you were at a 2 out of 10, and then Tuesday you wake up and all of a sudden you're at 6 out of 10. What did we do? Did you sit for longer? Did you go run hills, like you said? Like what else did we do? So I feel like having daily assessments of how you're progressing, and introducing one thing at a time is the big thing when kind of getting back back to running.
That's awesome. So. That is super, super, super helpful. I think the daily check-in with how you're feeling and kind of identifying the things that may be breaking you down in between time. Because I think when I think of myself, I tend to think only really about the running thing, and not necessarily about like, oh, well, I also walked my dogs and I also sat at my desk for like 3 hours and I did all these other things and I was up the stairs and down the stairs. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So you don't tend to think of all the extra stuff that you're doing for yourself. I can do it for my runners and going, oh yeah. You carried like 50 pounds of groceries back and forth from your house. Yeah, that's probably going to affect your running. Okay. Yeah. For myself, I'm,
I get it. So great. That's why I have my own physical therapist. I rarely treat myself.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
I need somebody to be like, stop being dumb.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Exactly right. Exactly right. Oh my goodness. So I have one last question for you. I could talk to you all day, but I know that you have other things that you have to do in your life. So if you have been given advice, if there's advice that you've been given, or if there's advice that you would like to give, what would it be?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I've recently came across, like I said, in the last year or two, is really identifying what motivates me to run. And aside from the extrinsic factors, right? So like the PRs and the races and the medals, intrinsically, if you remove all of that, would I still be running? And that's really helped me to kind of reshape my mindset in terms of not getting so down on myself when I don't train, when I don't run, and really just enjoying the ability that we have to run, like just being grateful, like my lungs, my heart is pumping, my legs are moving. So I'd say find what truly at your core kind of dive right in, figure out what is going to keep you running without all the exterior noise.
I love that.
Thank
Absolutely
you.
love that. No, I really do. I think it's finding, people talk about that all the time, finding your personal why. What is the thing that you personally get out of running, and focus on that, and don't worry about all the rest of it. Because
even though we all love our medals, I'm not saying don't get your
tell me about it. I love getting medals. Like, I love the medals. It's not even so much like getting the medal as like, they're just certain medals, it's like the meaning. And then there are just certain medals where I'm just like, oh, I just love this medal, this little piece of tchotchke. I just love it. It's so great. It's so beautiful.
I know. It's funny, like the Boston Marathon medal, like the unicorn, like I've definitely seen bigger, fancier medals, but it's that unicorn. It's that unicorn.
It's the gravitas of knowing that you did that. Yeah. Awesome. Dr. Dani, thank you so very much for joining me on the show today. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. Thank you.
Awesome. I'd like to take a moment to thank Dr. Dani for joining me on the show today. Dr. Dani, it was really a great conversation with you. I really enjoyed learning a little bit more about your individual physical therapy practice, but also how you apply your experience as a competitive athlete to your practice and working with runners to become better at their running practice, and also helping runners to recover better. You bring a lot of compassion along with the wellspring of knowledge that you have. And I appreciate you sharing this time with me today. For you, my dear listeners, if you would like to connect with Dr. Dani, I will put information about how to connect with her in the show notes. Be sure to join me here again next week for the next episode of the Last 10th podcast.